Welcome to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. Iranian negotiators reportedly made a last-ditch push for more concessions from the United States and 5 other world powers as the talks on the fate of Iran's nuclear program come down to the final hours before the crucial deadline. Critics say this is the latest example of why Washington can't trust Tehran. Here with reaction is South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
Thank you.
All these last-minute concessions, is the United States making concessions?
Well, there's a guy who defected in Switzerland who is an Iranian journalist, if there is such a thing. And he defected in the last couple of days. He said that he couldn't write anything about the nuclear talks or anything in Iran without censorship being used by the Ayatollahs. He got frustrated. He was a Rouhani guy, the president of Iran. He was one of his associates. And he said as a throwaway line, oh, by the way, the Americans have adopted the Iranian position trying to convince the Europeans that what Iran wants is reasonable. So not only are we in the 11th hour where they're making more demands, we've got who brought you the Mideast as it is today. We've got people on the American side who are completely clueless as to the threats we face throughout the region and what a bad deal would do.
What do you think at this point, then, we should just walk away from the deal? The president keeps saying it's either this deal or war.
There is no way. Let's see. Okay, here's my retort to that. Regarding a nuclear capability, the Arabs are going to want to bomb themselves. So a bad deal, Mr. President, leads to a nuclear arms race in the Mideast. It puts Israel in an untenable position. A good deal would allow them to have a nuclear power program that can't be used to make a bomb. You don't understand the following, that a bad deal, which locks in place a large enrichment program, is going to lead to nuclear weapons proliferation throughout the Mideast. One day they'll use these weapons. So the choice I have in mind is between no deal, no nuclear arms race, and a good deal.
Okay, so how do you get the good deal? The administration was saying, look, we've been trying, we've used our leverage.
Get a new president.
Sanctions. Okay, so how do you have a new
Well, basically what you have to do is convince the Iranians that they're never going to have a nuclear breakout without a military action being taken. The Iranians believe right now that Washington, President Obama, would not use military force to stop a breakout. So they have that as sort of the trump card. They're trying to get a deal that would lock in their nuclear program and give them just a matter of months. If they chose to develop a weapon, they'd be very close to a weapon. They're trying to get sanctions relief and maintain a nuclear program to build a bomb all at the same time. The goal of the negotiations 2 years ago was to dismantle their nuclear program. Now the goal is to lock in place a nuclear program that would take a year to break out if the UN did their job. So we've lost the whole goal of these negotiations. The only thing that will lead to a good deal in the Mideast with the Iranians, if they believe military force would be used to stop their nuclear ambitions. And if they don't believe that, you'll never get a good deal.
All right, you know, the administration has gone back and forth on whether it's going to bring whatever deal it has to Congress and get a vote of some kind. Now they seem to think maybe they're going to bring it to you guys.
Oh, no, they're going to bring it.
What's going to happen?
We're going to make them bring it to us. The only reason they're conceding that Congress will have a role in this is because we've got 66 co-sponsors, all Republicans, and 12 Democrats saying we want to look at the deal before we agree to relieve congressional sanctions that we created. Congress passed the sanctions against Iran 100-0 over the president's objection. So they're not being nice to us. We've been able to convince enough Democrats that you should want to look at this deal as much as we do, because a bad deal will lead to a nuclear arms race. So basically the White House is losing control of the Democratic Party. When Chuck Schumer signed onto the bill requiring Congress to approve any deal before it becomes binding, that was a breakthrough moment. So we've got the votes to override his veto. Congress will look at this deal, and we will not agree to lift congressional sanctions until we look at the deal and vote on it. And at the end of the day, if it's a good deal, I'll vote for it. If it's a bad deal, I'll vote against it. And to the President, if you take this deal to the UN Security Council first, If you go to the United Nations before you come to your own Congress, there'll be a backlash like you've never seen in Congress, and we'll suspend aid to the UN because that would be so provocative.
You know, in listening to you talk about this with obvious depth of knowledge and history and background, as well as the legal ramifications, as you look around the world, there's every continent is on fire. I mean, the Middle East is on fire. North Africa is on fire. Putin's pushing his way around, gobbling up parts
China
of Europe.
is intimidating their neighbors.
What do you say to the
Switzerland's been okay, by the way. We're watching you, Switzerland.
What do you say to the people who say this is going to be a foreign policy election, we need American leadership? I think the guy who ought to run for president is Lindsey Graham. What do you
Well,
say
Lindsey Graham may very well take you up on that. I believe the next president of the United States is going to have a mess on their hands. If you don't understand the world for what it is, who our friends are and who our enemies are, you know, you're not ready to be commander-in-chief. The one thing I would say, if I do run, it will be with the belief that I'm ready to be commander-in-chief on day one. 1% of us have been fighting this war since 9/11. They've sacrificed greatly. They deserve a commander-in-chief worthy of their sacrifice. Everything you see playing out in the Mideast is a result of poor policy choices by this president. Not leaving troops behind in Iraq, not doing a no-fly zone when he was advised to do so to get Assad out of the mix, drawing a red line with Assad over the chemical weapons and doing nothing about it, letting Putin basically dismember the Ukraine. The next president of the United States needs to be strong. We need to rebuild our military that's being gutted as I speak. And we need to tell the Iranians the following. If you want a peaceful nuclear power program, you can have it. If you want a nuclear power plant to produce power, I've got no problem with that. But you will not have the capability to make a bomb. And if you want a bomb, you're going to have a fight, and you're going to lose that fight. To Putin, if you continue to dismember your neighbor, we're going to drive you in the ground economically. To the Chinese, if you continue to be disruptive in the neighborhood, you're going to pay an economic price because we're not let you intimidate your way into market share. We need about 14 aircraft carriers. We need to rebuild our military to have influence around this world. But the influence America brings to the table is a vision where we support freedom. We stand behind our friends. We don't throw Israel under the bus. What's missing in the Mideast and throughout the world is an American president who understands that it is our destiny to lead, and you lead from the front, not from behind.
That sounds like a pretty well thought out presidential platform. When are you going to make a decision?
I'll make a decision by the end of the May. But between now and the time I decide to run in the 2016 election, I will do everything I can to make sure we stop a bad deal with Iran, to rally the Congress in a bipartisan fashion to speak up and speak out against a bad deal with Iran, to rebuild our military. We're going to have the smallest army since 1940, the smallest navy since 1915. These sequestration budget cuts are gutting the military. I'm going to try to find a way in a bipartisan fashion to replace the defense cuts with something that makes more sense. We've got a lot to do in 2015 to make sure we can defend this nation in 2016.
That sounds like a man with a plan. Senator Graham, thanks for joining us. Check out FoxNews.com for more on the Iran nuclear talks, on the Yemen civil war, and obviously on Senator Graham's presidential ambitions.
One thing, Kate.
Yeah.
If we get this deal wrong with Iran, if we do a bad deal that leads to a nuclear arms race, this program will be called DEFCON 4.
And that's on the verge of nuclear war. Wow. That's it for KT McFarland and DEFCON 3. Thanks for watching.